Welcome back to the most professional sports channel on YouTube. Welcome back to Swivel Chair Sports. I'm your host, Zach Circlebark Burkle, here with the host today, Aaron. Go and say hi, Aaron.
If you like our content, be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment and let us know what you think.
But other than that, let's go ahead and get into it. So in this video, we'll be ranking the current NFL head coaches in a tier list based off of their complete NFL head coaching career. So to preface this, we are only going to be looking at their NFL head coaching career. We're not going to be looking at college. We're not going to be looking at any assistant coaching history. We're only going to be looking at their NFL head coaching accolades, records, that kind of stuff. So without further ado, I guess we'll go ahead to the tier list and show you what we're talking about. So with that out of the way, we'll go ahead and get started with the rest of the head coaches, starting in the AFC West with Sean Payton, obviously most known up until his time in Denver as being the head coach for the Drew Brees-led New Orleans Saints. Won one Super Bowl in 2011 with Drew Brees down there in NOLA. Had a lot of success in the regular season for sure. Fell up short in the playoffs a lot, however. Specifically, a couple games, one to the Vikings, where Stephon Diggs became a household name, and then obviously the infamous Rams playoff game where the egregious pass interference call was not made. Just story of heartbreak after winning that one Super Bowl in 2011 for Sean Payton down there in NOLA. Seemingly hung him up for good, I guess. Seemingly hung him up for good whenever he retired down there after Drew Brees also left. And then Denver came calling. You know, had Russell Wilson up there who had underperformed in his first season under the Denver Broncos flag. Thought bringing in Sean Payton could maybe turn that ship around, and so far, definitely some improvements, some noticeable improvements this last season. Hopefully more in the future now that Russ is gone and they've moved on to their new franchise guy in Bo Nix. So what are your thoughts on Sean Payton's career so far? I definitely think it borders on legendary, but you got to factor in all those playoff disappointments as well after that big Super Bowl win.
I think he borders on overrated.
Really?
To be honest.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I mean all those years with Drew Brees and let's be honest, not that great division. I mean,
that's fair.
Who were they fighting all that time? The Falcons with Matt Ryan, who really didn't have all that much success either. Only one Super Bowl win. Kind of like you said, lots of disappointing playoff exits. Only one conference title. So I think he probably still has some more to show for him to be a legendary coach. And let's not forget that he was a big reason that the Saints team was in the cap held position that it was. And that's part of, I think, why he retired. He just didn't want to deal with that anymore.
That's true, but I try not to factor in the GM aspects that he may have played a part in New Orleans and try to focus just on the on-field production. Regular season, he was always solid. You knew that they were going to be playoff contenders every single year during his time there. You could attribute a lot of that to Drew Brees, but I don't know. I'd at least have
division.
And their bad division, but I'd at least have him in the good category. Where would you rank him? You'd put him in the room to improve?
Yeah, he's definitely a good coach.
Okay.
I mean, the teams that he puts out there is good. But I think lauding him as this legendary figure.
That's okay. I see what you're saying by overrated then.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't think he's in the realm of Andy Reid's and Belichick's and all those. I definitely don't think he's up there, but I think he's
spoilers.
Well above average. Well, we haven't got. Yeah, I mean we're about to get to him. Next, we got Jim Harbaugh, whose NFL head coaching career consists mostly of, I think, exclusively of just the time with the Niners during the Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick days. Made it to one Super Bowl where fell just short to his brother and the Baltimore Ravens. Then after that, kind of milled around similar to, I guess, Sean Payton's experience in New Orleans, where they were always playoff contenders during his time there, and then kind of once they seemingly became less relevant, he left, went to the college ranks, and built his name back up, and now he's back in Los Angeles as a Charger. So, what are your thoughts on, the new Harbaugh brother coming back to the NFL?
I hated him when he was with the 49ers.
I thought he was great.
Just one of those guys that it felt like every time you saw him, he was crying to the refs about some call, always screaming about something.
Good coach though.
And seeing him, seeing him at Michigan seems to really have mellowed out. His press conferences are legendary, if nothing else. I think he's a good coach.
Yeah, no, he would be. I mean, he hasn't been an NFL head coach enough for me to put him near the legendary category. I'd have him at good just because that time in San Francisco was very impressive. He had turned a really bad franchise around and made them Super Bowl contenders, which is something to be said about that. He's hoping to do the same now in Los Angeles. So, no, I think he's had a really good career to this point and just looks to continue building on it. So, next we got legendary. I mean, I guess I kind of spoiled it right there, but we got Andy Reid, Kansas City Chiefs head coach. I don't think it's... Now, don't get me wrong. Probably 7 to 10 years ago, he would not probably be in the legendary category for me. He'd be in the good. You could maybe even say overrated category, because up until he won that first Super Bowl, a lot of playoff failures in Andy Reid's history. Problems with clock management early on in his career, specifically in Philadelphia, and then the early years in Kansas City. But since Patrick Mahomes got drafted, he seems to have found his perfect match there at the quarterback position, and won three Super Bowls in the last 5 years now, been to 4 out of the last 5. So I don't think you can put him anywhere but legendary at this point. You can say Mahomes carried him, that's fine, but he was right on the brink before Mahomes got there. He just couldn't get over that last hump, and that's all he needed, it seems. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to find kind of the same thing with some of these other coaches that we're going to talk about that just aren't quite in that legendary tier. They just need to find their quarterback. Sean Payton, who we already talked about, he had Drew Brees. They got there once. They just couldn't quite get there again. They got their guy Bo Nix now. So we'll see if he's, Sean Payton's perfect match. But Andy Reid, yeah, the offensive genius. I think some of that time with Alex Smith kind of helped him with that clock management and game management sort of things. And then obviously having mentored Patrick Mahomes into what he is now. Just absolutely awesome to have him as the Chiefs head coach.
Yeah, I remember whenever we first signed him, the city was ecstatic. We were very excited when we first got Andy Reid because we had just went through just a long line of head coaching turnover. And
shit.
Yeah,
just
really
shit.
bad head coaching for a long time, and then Andy Reid comes in and completely turns the franchise around, and now we're atop the NFL. So next we have because we had Antonio Pierce in the too early category. So now we're on to the NFC West. Starting off with Sean McVay, Los Angeles Rams head coach. Obviously, when he was first hired, I believe he was the youngest head coach in NFL history. That's been overtaken now, I believe. I could be wrong, but still super, super young. Still a lot ahead of him if he wants there to be. But I believe there's also been some murmurs of him potentially retiring early, maybe whenever this Rams team starts going downhill. But I don't know if I really believe that. I think Sean McVay is going to be a head coach in the NFL for a long time. Again, if he wants to be, maybe he doesn't want to be, but he's proven to be kind of an offensive genius at times. maybe some disappointment here and there in the playoffs outside of the one Super Bowl run. But what are your thoughts on Sean McVay?
Well, first of all, he's got an incredible memory. I think
Better than
anybody
ours.
who knows anything about football, oh yeah,
Yeah, way better than
way
ours.
better than ours.
Yeah.
Knows how good his memory is. Just seeing those clips of him, somebody asks him a play number from a game and he just rattles it off and what the play call was and what happened. Just absolutely incredible recall. But yeah, he's turned what was a very piss poor St. Louis Rams team into a Super Bowl winning LA Rams team. So credit to him for really turning around what was just kind of like a mediocre franchise for a long time.
Yeah, made the Rams sexy again, you could say. Brought back those. Well, they were sexy back in the '90s during the Kurt Warner years. He brought them.
Uniforms are way worse.
Well, sure, but the play on the field's what matters at the end of the day, and he's brought them back to relevancy on that front. So definitely in the good category. Could easily be a legend whenever it's all said and done. Next, we've got Jonathan Gannon, head coach for the Arizona Cardinals. Fairly new head coach. I think last year might have been his first season, if I'm not mistaken, after making his way over as the DC for the Philadelphia Eagles for a little bit. So not a ton to go off here. His first year, I think, was okay given the circumstances. You got to remember Kyler Murray was out for the large portion of the season, and they were kind of feisty there during those weeks. If you remember, when the Josh Dobbs magical run that he had, so
Beat the Cowboys.
They beat the Cowboys. Oh, that was embarrassing for them. But oof, yeah, I remember that, and we should have known. But yeah, I've been kind of impressed with what he's been able to do there in Arizona in just 1 year. I expect him to improve this next season after bringing in a lot of young talent through the draft specifically. So I could see him being in the next man up or next up category. I don't want to put him into room to improve because I don't think we've really seen enough for that. I'm sure.
I would put him in too early to tell.
Okay.
Just because, like you said, Kyler missed 8 or 9 games last season, so I don't think we really got to see kind of that offense as it was supposed to look, and that defense just was, it needed improvement, and they went and kind of showed that in the draft. So I think it's not necessarily fair to put him in next up because he hasn't really shown, the promise, the success that you would expect to find for a coach that's next up. But I don't think he's a bad coach yet.
No, that's fair. I didn't know we were putting these guys too early, but that makes sense. I definitely think he belongs there, especially with only 1 year under his belt. Probably makes the most sense. So I definitely think they're on the right track there in Arizona. Next, we got Kyle Shanahan, head coach for the San Francisco 49ers. Took over a few years ago after coming up just short in the Super Bowl as the OC for the Atlanta Falcons. During his time in San Francisco, they've been Super Bowl contenders basically every single season, making it twice, losing both times, unfortunately, in fourth quarter comebacks, which I really think that's the only flaw with Shanahan. I think he would be the perfect head coach if it wasn't for those second half collapses in those big time games that we've seen. Granted, it's been against arguably the best quarterback we've seen in since Tom Brady, but yeah, I don't know. I won't. Without a Super Bowl, it's hard for me to put him in the legendary category. So I think he goes in good. What do you think?
I think he's legendary. I think he's legendary for coming in second place.
Oh, dang. Okay. You got me in the first half, not gonna lie. Dang, I was really like, oh, okay. I was like, little short, only like 5 seasons as head coach, and he's already legendary, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely on his way.
He is.
Definitely needs to get that Super Bowl win to prove it. But
I think that's the only thing.
Him and Lynch have something good going on over there. Gotta get it while you've got Brock Purdy on that rookie contract.
Mm-hmm.
And that stacked offense and defense. So, if they don't get it with in the next 3 or 4 seasons, then I think they're going to be in real trouble, and that could cause them some real problems.
Yeah, I don't see them. I mean, you never know. I mean, obviously they could end up firing him, and that's how they part ways. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen at all. What'll probably happen is the team starts kind of falling apart because just too much money, and then maybe he goes and finds a better opportunity elsewhere. But he's always going to have a job in the NFL for the foreseeable future. He's a great head coach. I think he's one Super Bowl title away from being legendary. I really do, because he's proven that he can be consistent year in and year out. Next, we are moving on to the AFC North, starting with Kevin Stefanski for the Cleveland Browns. Came in during the Baker Mayfield era, took over while Baker was still under center, and now he's got Deshaun Watson to work with.
He treated your guy Baker real bad.
He treated my guy Baker real bad, but outside of that, he's been a really solid head coach for the Cleveland Browns. Brought some real stability to a really unstable franchise. Was my pick to win Coach of the Year last year with the Deshaun Watson debacle that we saw, where you didn't know if he was going to play, and when he did, he didn't play that great. And they still managed to somehow, be competitive, be a playoff contender. So I think a lot of credit should be given to Kevin Stefanski for the performance the Browns had last year. And I think he's in the next up category, because I think it's still a little too early to put him in the good section. What do you think?
Well, unfortunately, I think his ability to sort of progress up this coaching tier list is going to be severely hampered by the Deshaun Watson contract.
Yeah, and the division.
Real hard to put. Yeah, and a very good division. It's going to be real hard to put a good team together with the cap problems that contract is going to pose, which is going to show what he's really made of. And I think he's a good coach.
Yeah,
I see the argument for putting him in next up, but I think you consider what that franchise was before he got there.
That's fair too.
Just fired coach after fired coach after fired coach. They seem to have found their guy, and good for them. Yeah,
I like him a lot. I'm going to put him in the next up category, but he's probably going to be like as close to good as you can get, mainly just to kind of even this out a little bit, because this is getting a little naked. Moving on to Zach Taylor for the Cincinnati Bengals. Had a lot of recent success with Joe Burrow under center these last few seasons. Been title contenders ever since they drafted that man. And he got healthy, because his first year he tore his ACL real quick. But ever since he got healthy, the Bengals have been right up.
I don't know if you could say Joe Burrow's been healthy.
Ever since
I don't know.
Ever since
played a full season healthy.
Ever since Joe Burrow's been able to play more than a handful of games, the Bengals have been title contenders, and I honestly think Zach Taylor's a little bit of a.
You think he's overrated?
I do. I don't. He wasn't good before Burrow got there. Granted, a quarterback is a big piece that you're missing, but yeah, I haven't been super impressed. Well, actually, last year made me kind of change my mind on that. So that is kind of how I was thinking, and now I'm just remembering last year with Jake Browning under center, they were still a really competitive team, and I think you got to kind of chalk that up to the system. So I've kind of changed my tune on Zach Taylor over the last few years, or really just last year. After I felt like Joe Burrow had kind of carried him to his recent success, but yeah, over the course of the last few seasons, with Burrow and Browning last for a large portion of last year, he's really turned that franchise around and made them a real scary team atop the conference. So I think I'm gonna put him in next up because I don't want to put him in good. I don't think he's quite on that level. What do you think?
Yeah, I think last year was his first real, real test.
Yeah.
Kind of having this revamped Bengals team, minus a franchise, a true franchise guy. And they held their own. They were, playoff contenders up until the end. And, yeah, I would say I would probably put him in good.
Okay.
But I can see the argument for next up.
Yeah, like I said, it's still a small sample size without Joe Burrow. I feel like, granted, it was really impressive what he did last year with Jake Browning. Moving on to John Harbaugh of the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, he's enjoyed a lot of success throughout his historic career up there in Baltimore, with one Super Bowl title to his name during the Joe Flacco days back in 2012, where he beat his brother Jim in the big game. After that, he's enjoyed a ton of regular season success and playoff success to an extent. Now with Lamar Jackson under center there, always considered one of the top teams in the AFC, specifically on the defensive side, because I think a lot of credit is due to John Harbaugh and his eye for defensive talent. So, yeah, I think it's an unquestioned legend right here. What are your thoughts?
I don't know about unquestioned legend. I do think he's a legend because of his success with what is essentially two completely different Ravens teams.
Yeah.
At this point. So, yeah, he's a legend. Two different franchise quarterbacks kind of led them through that change there. I think he's a big reason that they brought Lamar Jackson back. His commitment to him and getting that deal done. I think he's a big reason that Lamar Jackson came back. So yeah, he's definitely one of the best coaches in the league right now.
Yeah, he's enjoyed a lot of success, like you said, in many different ways. That Joe Flacco team was completely different from this Lamar Jackson team. So he knows how to coach football, and that's what matters at the end of the day. So next we got probably another legend here, Mike Tomlin, Pittsburgh Steelers. Enjoyed several years of success. I believe he's the longest tenured head coach in the league now that Bill Belichick's gone. So that alone, I think, kind of tells you how successful he's been to stick around for as long as he has. Obviously has the one Super Bowl, because he was not quite there with Big Ben's first. So the one Super Bowl win, another Super Bowl appearance where they lost to the Green Bay Packers. Even without a franchise quarterback these last few years since Big Ben retired, and the latter years of Big Ben where he just wasn't nearly the same player, still somehow finds a way to be above 500 or at least 500 every single season. So the dude knows how to play or how to coach winning football. And I think, with that being said, he's probably the most obvious legend on this list, not named Andy Reid.
Yeah, the success that they've had these last couple seasons with their quarterback situation is just, I think, fairly unheard of.
Insane.
Just, it felt like there for the last 3 seasons that it was a quarterback carousel. One quarterback would start 3 weeks, and then they'd get benched, and they'd bring in another, and then they would suck, and they'd bring in another. So just going through all of that and finishing above 500 all that time, it's a real testament to him and the team he builds and how great of a defense the Pittsburgh Steelers have had while he's been there. So, yeah, definitely legendary coach, shoe-in Hall of Famer.
Yeah, without a doubt. All right, moving on to the NFC North, starting with Matt Eberflus of the Chicago Bears. His head coaching career hasn't quite gotten off to the start that he probably would have liked. A couple of mediocre seasons in Chicago with Justin Fields under center. Now looks to turn it around with new franchise quarterback Caleb Williams, along with a seemingly stacked wide receiver room. So, not a lot of people were wondering whether or not he was going to get fired this offseason. With Caleb Williams coming in, trying to, kind of start a new era, some would say, in Chicago. He's had a lot of ups and downs throughout his 2 years, I believe, with the Bears, but I don't know. I definitely think he probably falls under room to improve because we just haven't seen enough to put him any higher. But this year could change all of that for sure with Caleb Williams under center. What do you think?
Matt Eberflus. Let's see. I would kind of agree, room to improve. I do think he took sort of a step last year. Obviously better record than 2022. Started off the season rocky, but then, kind of put some wins together in the latter part of the season. And showed a lot of progress as a team. So I think that's part of the reason why that they kept him around. But yeah, there's still a lot to improve on. Granted, they did build what I think a lot of people would say is could be a fairly scary team this offseason. Added a lot of weapons, so I think it'll be exciting to see what this Bears team turns out to be this year.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this year is going to be his make it or break it opportunity. If they're successful this season, he's probably going to hang around for a little bit. If they have another mediocre to bad year, he's probably out the door. So this year's everything.
Which just
for him.
Sucks for Caleb Williams.
It does, which is why I kind of wish they would have started fresh with a head coach this year. Is because that reason right there is because it's basically Eberflus' last chance. And if it's bad, Caleb Williams has to go through that turnover in his second season. But moving on
Unfortunately, that's not uncommon.
Yeah, no, it's way too common. Moving on to Matt LaFleur of the Green Bay Packers. Enjoyed a lot of success during his early years as head coach for the Pack, with Aaron Rodgers under center. Always were always a playoff team, always a title contender. Fallen just short a few times, specifically to the San Francisco 49ers. And then this last year, getting an opportunity to mature Jordan Love. Took a really young team to the playoffs, sneaking in as a 7 seed, and then beating the 2-seeded Dallas Cowboys in the first round, and giving the Niners a little bit of a run for their money in the second as well. So I think this past year we really got to see the full potential of Matt Eberflus, because obviously with Aaron Rodgers under center, he was kind of the player coach as well during those early years. But Matt LaFleur seemingly a great coach. I think he belongs in the good tier. I think this last year just catapulted him up from next up to good, in my opinion.
I would put him in next up, purely because those first seasons with Rodgers, you didn't exactly know what he was. Last year, big step forward with Jordan Love. It kind of a small sample size for just one quarterback. So that's my argument for putting him in next up. He is knocking on the door, though.
Yeah,
he's banging on the door to being a good coach.
Yeah, like I said before, last season, maybe even halfway through last season, I would have still had him in the next up category. But then that last kind of home stretch towards the end of the year, where they made the playoff push and then beat the Cowboys and almost beat the Niners, that kind of catapulted him up for me. But I could totally see the argument for him still needing a little bit to prove.
And I mean, the one thing that sticks out in my mind is the decision against the Bucks a few seasons ago, when they had Tom, and I think they had a 4th and goal or something like that, and kicked the field goal, gave the ball back to Tom Brady, and he just had to go down and get a field goal to win the game.
Yeah, you never
obviously
do that,
hindsight,
Tom Brady, but yeah, it's tough.
I think everybody was screaming that at the top of their lungs at the time. Don't give him a chance. So
yeah,
that's like the one big mistake that sticks out in my mind for him. But
yeah, I think but we're gonna get to another one here in a second. And actually, since we're in the division, we'll go ahead and pull him up next. Another head coach who's kind of developed a track record of being a little over aggressive in the playoffs. Mr. Dan Campbell for the Detroit Lions. Last year, really kind of showed the world what he was made of as a head coach. Kind of taking those final steps out of the rebuilding phase with the Lions, making them playoff team, getting them to the conference championship game, and then making a few boneheaded coaching decisions down the stretch, with opportunities to kind of seal that game up, losing a big lead to a Niners team along the way as well. But I don't want that to overshadow the success he had in the regular season and with the Lions as a whole, because what that franchise was before he got there was a dumpster fire. And since he's taken over, that franchise is finally relevant again for the first time in a long time, and they're Super Bowl contenders for the first time in my lifetime. So with that being said, I think he belongs squarely in the next up category, borderline good. But yeah, that conference championship last year just really left a bad taste in my mouth. So
well, his press conferences are legendary, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Biting kneecaps, all that jazz. But yeah, it just felt like he is what what's his name? Chargers former coach.
Brandon Staley.
Staley, yeah. He's what the Chargers wish Brandon Staley turned out to be.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he always went for it at the wrong time, seemingly, and Dan Campbell always goes for it.
Yeah,
apparently.
Yeah. There's no bad time with him.
And it worked out for them up until it didn't. So, whether or not that sort of streak continues, I guess we'll see. But he shows faith in his players, and he did turn that Detroit franchise around. So, I would agree. Next up,
yeah,
I'd like to see one more season of that success before I put him in good.
I would agree, and there's definitely something to be said for dying by what you do best or whatever, I guess. In basketball, it's called live by the three, die by the three. Obviously, that's essentially what Dan Campbell did there in the conference championship game. They went for it all season long, and that's all they did there at the end, really, was just keep doing what they've been doing all season, and it just didn't work out for them that time when it mattered most. So definitely something to be said for that. Having the confidence in your players there as well is huge. So he's well on his way to being a good coach and maybe even a legend way down the road, but obviously way too early to tell on that front. So next we got Kevin O'Connell, Minnesota Vikings head coach. Been there for a few seasons now. Took over during the Kirk Cousins era, obviously, because that just ended. Enjoyed some success with Kirk Cousins, a little bit of inconsistency as well, but you could chalk some of that up to injury, specifically at the running back position. And obviously his offenses have been really, really good. Kirk Cousins has been what was a real treat for him to work with, seemingly, and drafting Justin Jefferson to go along with it was great. So throughout his early years as an NFL head coach, he's enjoyed some good talent to coach up, and I think he probably goes to the next up category because, I mean, maybe even, I don't want to say too early to tell, he's been coaching for too long, but it's going to be interesting to see for sure what he can do with a rookie quarterback and or Sam Darnold.
Yeah, I would agree, next up. Obviously, some stellar offenses, some questionable defenses.
Yeah, really bad.
So I think this season will be kind of the make it or break it. Maybe not make it or break it, but like really kind of show us what he is
made
with
of, yeah.
Kirk Cousins going to Atlanta. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how similar that Vikings offense looked how it did with Kirk.
Yeah, I think both Darnold and McCarthy have some similar qualities that Kirk had, so I could see the offense looking very similar, and maybe that even being the reason they went out and got Darnold. So next, moving on to the AFC South, starting with Doug Peterson of the Jacksonville Jaguars, moving down there after taking a couple years off, preceding his time in Philadelphia, where he won one Super Bowl during the Nick Foles magical playoff run that we were all able to witness in 2017.
Yeah.
Big Dick Nick. And then, Joe kind of milled around with Philadelphia during some mediocre years with Carson Wentz. Wasn't able to get nearly back to the Super Bowl after that one title. Ended up parting ways with Philadelphia and moved down to Jacksonville, where he got to take young quarterback Trevor Lawrence under his wing and coach him up in his second season, where turned the franchise around from a really bad year to making the playoffs and coming back against the Chargers in the first round, where Trevor Lawrence kind of made his name known at the NFL level. And then last year, obviously really disappointing. A lot of that probably chalked up to injuries, lots of ups and downs. So really, I think that's kind of the story of Peterson's head coaching run, is inconsistency, ups and downs, really, really high highs and really, really low lows. So it's kind of a roller coaster with him at the helm. What do you think?
Yeah, seemingly some of the same issues that he had in Philadelphia with quarterback injury problems. Carson Wentz having several seasons plagued with injuries, kind of leading to frustrations, I think, in a boil over with a lack of success there in Philadelphia, which led to his exit. Then going down, kind of like you said, and being able to mold Trevor Lawrence, kind of how he wants him to be. And kind of, I don't know if you'd necessarily say turning around the Jaguars franchise, because they were decent there for a few years with Blake Bortles and that stacked defense. Made I believe a fairly deep playoff run one year.
AFC Championship game, lost to the Patriots.
Yeah, so I don't know if you could necessarily say turn it around, but
yeah,
definitely got them back on track.
That's better.
So I guess we'll see what this year kind of has to hold. Hopefully they stay fairly healthy. Made some good off-season moves. Malik Neighbors. Yeah, no.
Brian Thomas.
Who they draft? Brian Thomas Jr. Yeah. To replace Calvin Ridley. So we'll see what that offense looks like.
Yeah, it's. Getting back on track's definitely the better term, because you're right, they were good before what's-his-face had taken over from the college ranks. Urban Meyer. Yeah, before Urban Meyer had taken over, they were a fairly competitive team, and then he just kind of seemingly destroyed the franchise for a season. But it's really hard to rate Peterson, man, because of the inconsistencies and the highs and the lows, and he's definitely not next up because he's way too experienced at this point in his career, so...
He's a good coach.
He's good. Yeah, I guess he's good. You got the Super Bowl alone, I guess, would catapult him out of the room to improve category. So, yeah.
Well, you can't help that as a quarterback to keep getting hurt.
That's true.
Not his fault.
That's true. Moving on to Shane Steichen of the Indianapolis Colts, where hasn't really gotten an opportunity with this franchise yet, with the quarterback he probably liked to have worked with last year, Anthony Richardson, getting hurt. Did keep the Colts really competitive with Gardner Minshew running the ship, though, which I think's a testament to his potential as a head coach throughout the rest of his run. But came over from Philadelphia, where he was the offensive coordinator during the Eagles' Super Bowl run with Jalen Hurts at the helm. You'd imagine that he'd run a similar system once Anthony Richardson gets healthy and up to speed. Ugh, not up to speed. Once Anthony Richardson gets healthy. But yeah, definitely, probably. I think maybe same as Gannon. Probably still too early to tell, right? Because we haven't really gotten to see him get a fair opportunity with his franchise quarterback yet.
That would be my argument to put him in next up.
That's a good, yeah.
He hasn't been able to mold his very young raw quarterback, or he hasn't really had the time to mold his young raw quarterback into what he could be. So that's an exciting prospect to watch. But taking the Colts almost to the playoffs last year with not only their backup quarterback who plays completely differently to what they expected Anthony Richardson to play as. It was a tough, scrappy Colts team last year, and that's my argument to put him in next up.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I was leaning next up, just thought it might have been a little too soon, but I think you're right. I think the difference between him and Gannon is he showed that he was able to succeed without his franchise guy, whereas Gannon didn't, but it's not really fair to penalize him for that, I don't think.
Yeah.
Next for you got DeMeco Ryans of the Houston Texans. Last year, as a rookie head coach, he took on paper, probably not supposed to be very good Texans team to the playoffs and made some noise in the playoffs where they beat the Browns, moved on to the second round, and just really impressive what he was able to do in just 1 year down there in Houston. I think his defensive pedigree was a big reason why their defense exceeded expectations like they did last year. And then obviously, I think him and CJ Stroud may be seemingly a match made in heaven down there as well. So really, really good year, really good start to a potentially great career. Obviously still really early, but similar to the Shane Steichen situation, I think you can put him in the next up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody expected the Texans to come out and make the playoffs, much less win a playoff game.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much credit you give him to building that team, but he definitely put out good products on the field. So yeah, next up for me.
Moving on to the NFC South, starting off with Dennis Allen of the New Orleans Saints. Last year, definitely did not meet expectations. Probably attribute a lot of that to the Derek Carr injury, of course. In a division that was not very good, the Saints were fighting for that playoff spot, that division title, but fell just short to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Some people were speculating he may be on the hot seat this offseason, but is sticking around for at least this next year. I think probably wasn't fair to fire him after the Derek Carr situation he had to deal with last year, where his first year in the system, as well as getting hurt the way he did and playing through injury as well, like he always does. So yeah, I don't think he's proven enough to me, though, to put him in the next up category, though. Probably in room to improve, but this next year could change a lot for him, I think.
Yeah, I'd lean room to improve, because I don't know that it's necessarily too early to tell.
Yeah, because he's been there a few years now.
The Saints are a tricky one because haven't really had their quarterback answer since Drew Brees left. I mean, they had Teddy Bridgewater and Jameis Winston, and haven't really been able to land or settle for someone that they want to be their franchise guy. Derek Carr comes in last year, some big expectations, but then struggled with injuries and at times just straight up bad play. So I don't really know what to expect from the Saints, even with a healthy Derek Carr, other than a pretty stout defense. So I think I'd lean towards room to improve.
Yeah, another thing to note is I don't know how much it really matters or how much it really shows Dennis Allen as a leader, but obviously the Jameis Winston thing this last year on the last game of the season where he just completely went against the coach's decision and chose to score that touchdown at the end. I don't really think that matters, as far as like the players are concerned, but it definitely could maybe indicate him not having full control of the locker room. So,
well, I don't know that anybody has full control over Jameis Winston.
That's true too. He's eating dubs every day. Moving on to Todd Bowles of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, taking over for Bruce Arians after he retired the year before Tom Brady left town as well. Brought in Baker Mayfield, who kind of steadied the ship. With Tom Brady walking out the door, a lot of people were concerned that maybe the Buccaneers weren't going to be as successful, and then Todd Bowles, along with Baker Mayfield, were able to, steer the team into a playoff berth and made some noise in the playoffs as well. So before moving down to Tampa Bay, spent some time up in New York, where he was the head coach for the Jets, almost making the playoffs in his first season up there with Ryan Fitzpatrick and Brandon Marshall. But outside of that, really hasn't had a super ton of success in his NFL head coaching career. Outside of that 1 year in New York, couple of disappointing seasons after that. And then here in Tampa Bay, we haven't really gotten to see too much quite yet. Had the one season with Tom Brady where they fell short in the playoffs. And then last year with Baker Mayfield, they seemingly may have taken a step forward, but obviously there's still some work to be done, I think. But it's hard for me to put him in the next up category with the pedigree he's gotten to an extent. I don't know if he quite falls into good either. So I think by default he's probably gonna have to go into room to improve. But that's really just because outside of last season and that 1 year with the Jets, he hasn't really had a lot of success.
Well, I mean, I don't think you can really knock any coach of the Jets too hard.
That's fair too.
That franchise just stunk forever after Rex Ryan.
No, he's the first one that took over.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if there's necessarily a whole lot to base him off. I think this year's gonna be the real telltale sign. I mean, I guess he has to go on room to improve because what scrub coach can't take Tom Brady to a Super Bowl?
That's good, yeah.
I don't necessarily think that anybody thought the Bucks would be playoff contenders the way they were. Well, maybe make the playoffs, but not necessarily win a playoff game, and they pretty handily smacked the Eagles last season. So that's obviously a big positive for his resume. But yeah, it's too early to tell. Doesn't feel right.
Yeah. Next up doesn't
feel right. Room to improve doesn't feel right. Do we just need a Todd Bowles?
A Todd Bowles tier? Okay, with that, let's do it. Let's do Todd Bowles. Next, we're moving on to Raheem Morris of the Atlanta Falcons. Raheem Morris having some head coaching history with the Tampa Bay Bucks back during the Jason Campbell days, where they weren't super successful. Few mediocre seasons, and then After that, he milled around as an assistant. Now he's getting another opportunity as a head coach here in Atlanta, where he takes over a team where they just added Kirk Cousins. What are your thoughts on Raheem Morris? I know we don't have a whole lot to go off here with him, but maybe kind of similar. He might go in the Todd Bowles category, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know. I'd probably lean towards room to improve.
Yeah.
Just because those Bucks teams weren't really anything special.
It wasn't Jason Campbell, it was Josh Freeman.
Got it. But yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to putting him in the Todd Bowles tier.
Yeah, I think kind of similar to Todd Bowles. He didn't really, well. With Josh Freeman, not Campbell, by the way. With Josh Freeman at quarterback, yeah, he was not very successful. Josh Freeman was, an okay NFL QB. He wasn't anything great. I think I'm okay with room to improve as well, actually. But I definitely think that's going to change this year. So, moving on to the AFC West. AFC West. Moving on to the AFC East, starting with Robert Saleh of the New York Jets. Obviously, he's been head of that organization for a few years now. Last year was supposed to be his first season with Aaron Rodgers under center, but that ended extremely prematurely in the first game of the year. And yeah, just not a ton of success, but I don't know if you can really chalk it up to him. They drafted Zach Wilson to be his franchise quarterback, and I don't think that was a good decision on the front office's part, so it's hard for me to penalize him for that. Kind of like you said earlier in the video, it's not really fair to penalize any Jets head coach because they're the Jets at the end of the day. But I think by default he's probably going to have to go into room to improve just because he's had no success up to this point. And last year he could have tried to do something. I mean, the defense hasn't been the problem, and he's a defensive guy, but the team as a whole just hasn't been good. And he's kind of let Aaron Rodgers come in and kind of take over the locker room seemingly instead of being a head coach. But I don't know. It's tricky.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, they haven't rolled out bad defenses. The last couple of years, they've had really good defenses.
Yeah.
They just couldn't do anything on offense. So I don't know that you can necessarily put all the blame on him. I definitely think the front office is partially to blame, especially for that Zach Wilson decision.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that didn't pan out, but they're gonna have to figure something else out now because Aaron Rodgers isn't getting any younger. He's got probably 2 more seasons left. I think people are speculating. So, we could be having this discussion again in 2 years where they have some success with Aaron Rodgers, but is it because of Aaron Rodgers or is it because Bob Saleh? So I would probably lean towards room to improve because it is partially the head coach's job to help build and develop players, and they haven't really done that on the offensive side with the exception of Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, you haven't seen any improvement since he's been the head coach of the team, and I think by default he's probably gonna have to fall under this category because of that. Next we got the AFC. It is the Jets. Yeah, that is a big crutch that they're gonna have to overcome.
That should be another tier.
Yeah, the Jets. Next we got Sean McDermott of the Buffalo Bills. Sean McDermott's been head coach for good few years now with Josh Allen for the majority, if not all of it, and a lot of regular season success for sure. Hasn't quite gotten over the hump in the playoffs. However, a lot of that they've just kind of ran into Kansas City, and that's an issue in itself. But even the years they didn't run into Kansas City, they lost to the Cincinnati Bengals. So yeah, I was in the camp that they should maybe look at moving on from Sean McDermott this offseason, and it's not necessarily because he's a bad coach. I just think that the Bills could maybe use a different voice in the locker room from the coaching spot, simply because maybe it's just gotten kind of tired, and when you keep doing the same thing over and over again, running into a brick wall after brick wall after brick wall, you got to switch something up. But I do think he is a decent head coach. Probably too experienced to be in next up. Probably too good to be in room to improve. So I think I'm going to put him in the good category. Even though I do think the Bills probably should be looking to move on.
Yeah, I'd put him in good. I can see the argument for maybe looking to move on from him, but it's not necessarily like he's coached bad games in the playoffs.
No.
Josh Allen has played as good as Josh Allen can play, and they just, the Chiefs had the ball last. That's just kind of how it's turned out. With the exception of that fake punt.
Yeah,
that was stupid. That was stupid. But yeah, he's a good coach.
He's a good coach. I do think you also kind of have to take into account the Stephon Diggs situation, but then again, Stephon Diggs went through the same thing in Minnesota, so maybe it's more on Diggs than it is on McDermott and the Bills. So, but yeah, he is a good coach. I think the Bills are just kind of ready for a change, in my opinion. But they definitely I don't think you could chalk up the playoff disappointments to coaching as much as you can just losing to a better team. So next we got Mike McDaniels of the Miami Dolphins. Took over a few years ago from Brian Flores, and seemingly kind of turned the Dolphins into real contenders since taking over. Has a great personality as well. Dude seems seemingly hilarious. His press conferences are great. But on the football field, he's been pretty solid. Comes from, the McVay, Shanahan coaching tree, so has similar qualities as far as, offenses go, and kind of an offensive genius, but hasn't really had quite the opportunity to find that next level of success. He's slowly, I think, brought up the Miami Dolphins from being kind of towards the bottom of the AFC to now they're consistently should be in the playoffs. And they made the step from not making the playoffs, just missing out on the playoffs, to then making the playoffs, and then making the playoffs and being somewhat competitive, but also losing fairly handedly. And I think if he can take that next step this year, they'll be in great position to find that title contention success that they're looking for or whatever. But yeah, I'd probably put him in the next up category because he's shown that he's an NFL caliber head coach.
Yeah, I'd probably lean next up. He just hasn't quite taken that step yet. Last year was kind of a confusing season because they were good in contention for their division. Didn't really beat any good teams. And then lost in the fashion they did against Kansas City. Granted, terrible weather game. So I don't think anybody really expected high-flying offenses that game, which is kind of what they're known for. But yeah, again, kind of last year plagued with injuries, so I don't know that you can necessarily blame him for that either. Yeah, next up.
All right, moving on to our last division, we got the NFC East. Starting off with Mike McCarthy of the Dallas Cowboys, who obviously before that was with the Green Bay Packers, won a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers up there, and then a lot of playoff disappointment preceding that. Just couldn't quite get back to the big game. Took a year off, then came down to Dallas, where he's been the head coach for a few seasons now. Similar situation, kind of, where they're a great regular season team, gets to the playoffs, and then a huge letdown, either in the first or second round. So, he's probably a good coach. Too old, too experienced to be in next up. I think he's a little too good to be in room to improve. So I think he's in the good category for me.
I mean, it's not his fault that the Cowboys are gonna cowboy.
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean, Vegas, he's got a history of cowboying his career too. So.
Yeah. He's a good coach. He is, I believe, on the hot seat. I don't think Jerry has renewed his contract yet, so could be gone after the season, looking for a new quarterback and a new head coach. That'll be kind of fun to watch how that plays out. But yeah, I think kind of like you said, he's won a Super Bowl, so I don't know if you can
it's like
put him in next up or too early to tell. And they're good in the regular season, so I don't think you can put him in room to improve. So I think he's a good coach.
Yeah. All right, next we got Nick Sirianni for the Philadelphia Eagles. A notable loudmouth, really fiery competitor. Really hates the Chiefs and Chiefs fans, so he doesn't like us, Aaron. Sorry to tell you. But
that's fine.
Other than that, he's been, successful during his short stint as head coach. Kind of a letdown last year after, making the Super Bowl the year before that. Been Super Bowl contenders, though, really, throughout his whole coaching career to this point. Hasn't been super long, but I think he's probably going to go in next up because he's been to a Super Bowl, obviously. Made the playoffs last year, even though they did disappoint. I kind of think he's a douche, but can't hate on the man's talent. So he finds a way to motivate players, and I think at the end of the day, that's what matters most. So I'll put him in the next up category.
I would go towards good coach. Obviously, the Super Bowl run 2 seasons ago. And then last year, you can't really blame him for losing the team's heart and soul, their head of security, Big Dom, for the remainder of the regular season. So
big kick in the
I think he's a good coach with all things considered, in their sort of collapse last season.
I'll put him in good just so that Philly fans don't find me. All right, next we got Dan Quinn of the Washington Commanders, recently hired this offseason. Hasn't had an opportunity to be, under the helm for the Commanders quite yet, but had a short stint in Atlanta where he took a Matt Ryan-led team to the Super Bowl, where they infamously lost a 28-3 lead to Tom Brady, and then his kind of career down there sort of fell apart after that. I think it took him a little bit of time to get over that. With kind of understandable. I mean, that's a big kick in the nuts for coming. Oh, goodness gracious, I couldn't imagine. I was watching it and I still couldn't believe it happened. But yeah, I think he's good. He's pretty solid. Next up, Todd Bowles, maybe? I don't know. You go first.
I would probably lean towards room to improve.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think so.
Aside from that Super Bowl run, you had Matt Ryan, you had Julio Jones in his prime, and you couldn't really do a whole lot with that. It's kind of a shame. So I would lean towards room to improve.
Yeah, I think it's really unfortunate. I think if that 28-3 comeback doesn't happen, I think it's a different story for him altogether, as well as a lot of people from that team. But man, I feel like that's just going to be a cloud that hangs over his head for the rest of his life. So. And finally, our last head coach on the list, we've got Brian Daboll of the New York Giants. Daboll, a lot of people considered may have been on the hot seat. Maybe the Giants were looking to move on from him this offseason, but he is sticking around for at least this next year. I guess they just didn't feel like he got a fair shake last season with the Daniel Jones injury and stuff like that. So hopefully he can improve upon what was a disappointing year last season after being somewhat competitive the year before that. So a little bit of ups and downs. I think he could probably be decent, but right now he's probably in the room to improve category because he just hasn't shown enough success for me.
Yeah, I definitely think room to improve. You gotta make the right QB choice this off season, in my opinion. You know what you've got with Daniel Jones, and I don't think he can.
Do you
cut it?
You don't know yet, right? I'm sure I got those glasses around here somewhere.
I do. I do. So I think you've got to give Drew Lock a shot. But yeah, next up, it's not fair. He's not really been given a fair shake. That Giants team has been garbage ever since Eli Manning retired. So he's done his best, but I think room to improve.
Yeah, I definitely think he could be a little bit more composed on the sidelines as well.
Definitely think he could be a good coach.
I think he could be too. I really do, but he just hasn't had the right opportunities yet. And what he's done with the limited opportunities he's been given has been kind of underwhelming. So here's our final NFL head coaching tier list. We have the three legends up here: Andy Reid, John Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin. We got a bunch of good coaches right here with Sean Payton, Jim Harbaugh, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Doug Peterson, Sean McDermott, Mike McCarthy, and Nick Sirianni. In our next up category, we got Kevin Stefanski, Zach Taylor, Matt LaFleur, Dan Campbell, Kevin O'Connell, Shane Steichen, D'Amico Ryans, and Mike McDaniels. In our room to improve tier, we've got Matt Eberflus, Dennis Allen, Raheem Morris, Robert Saleh, Dan Quinn, and Brian Daboll. In our too early to tell, in our too early tier, we've got Gerard Mayo, Antonio Pierce, Brian Callahan, Mike McDonald, Dave Canellis, and Jonathan Gannon. And then in our Todd Bowles category, which is not a bad thing, we have Todd Bowles, who was just kind of too weird for us to rank him in any of these others. So he got his own tier. Congratulations, Todd. What are your thoughts on our final tier list here, Aaron? Anything you think we should move around? Please say no, because I don't want to have to go back in there.
Maybe, but no.
Yeah, so here's our final tier list. Let us know down below if you agree or disagree. Make sure to like and subscribe. But other than that, I think that'll do it for this episode of the most unprofessional sports channel on YouTube, Swivel Chair Sports. I've been your host, Zach Zuckerberg-Purtle, here with the host today, Aaron. Go and say bye, Aaron.
Bye.
All right. Really appreciate you for sticking around and watching till the end. Make sure to like and subscribe if you made it this far. And other than that, have a great day. Deuces.